live in California, and I started learning programming a couple of years ago because I was working in nonprofit jobs, and I got really burned out, and I didn't want to work full-time anymore. And the only people I knew in the Bay Area where I was living who were making any money were programmers. And a lot of them seemed to be making money without full-time jobs. So this was very appealing to me. Additionally, I had sort of like, as long as I could remember, sort of bought into the idea that like programming is some magical thing, right? That's I don't know how many of you have encountered this, but people treat programmers like wizards when they don't know what programming is. And most people don't know what programming is, so they treat you like a wizard. And I was like, what is this wizardry? I want to know, you know? And especially because a lot of people around me were using this language that I didn't understand. And I was standing there in groups, you know, like they're talking about something. I have no idea what they're talking about. And this was actually a big motivation for me. Not anymore, but just want you to recognize that that's a motivation for some people, to know what you people are talking about. That's all. Okay. One moment, please. Okay, so this talk is sort of to help people get better at helping other people learn programming. Because how many of you have sort of like had to explain to someone who wasn't who was a beginner programmer or not a programmer at all, something about programming? How many of you have done that? Okay. And also, how many of you have sort of like actively tried to teach someone something, like anything about programming? Okay, so this is a lot of people. And sometimes when you're teaching someone, it's unclear whether what you have tried to communicate with them actually got across. And sometimes it's very obvious that there has been a deep failure, right? And you'll see this, you know, you'll either feel this in your own, or you'll see it in the other person. Sometimes that other person starts crying if they're me. So that's just an example. So, you know, I think that as someone who's been living and being around hackers for quite some time, and as someone who's sort of like very much wanted to understand and struggled to understand, and had a lot of different programmers try and help me, that I feel like I can provide some tips on how people who are sort of more advanced programmers can more effectively spend their time sharing what they know, and a lot of the time sharing something that they're like think is really cool and really interesting. And to have it be a happy experience for everyone, and to have the other person actually benefit from what you're trying to do. I already showed the kitty picture. So this is just a list of things that I didn't know when I was a beginner. And the main thing I didn't know was that the big boy voice is bullshit. And what I call the big boy voice is like when people like lower their voices and they're like, yes, let me tell, like, this is the best thing since, and then you like take this and it goes over here and a whole new thing, right? And there's like big letters, right? And it's like all across, and there's like, you know, things flying in from the PowerPoint. So that's what I call the big boy voice, and it's pervasive. It's absolutely, like, it is a cancer, it is a disease among programmers, and it's kind of like deeply toxic, right? This is why I put it as the number one thing. It is a source of a lot of the problems that I think happen in terms of communication between programmers and beginners. The main problem is that it's really intimidating, and it's really, you might not know that. It might be a cultural practice in your community, and it's like, oh, well, that's just how we all interact, right? We have a competitive environment. We have people who think that they're smart, and like the way, you know, our IRC channel interacts, it's like you make fun of someone if they don't know something, right? Or you like make a joke if they say something wrong. And maybe that's, you know, acceptable within your community, especially if everybody understands that we're joking, right? But for people who are new, it can be a real disaster, right? The main thing is it makes us not want to be around you if you're a person who uses the big boy voice. Yeah, people that I talk to, you know, who try to use jargon to intimidate, right, and other kinds of similar things, as soon as the conversation ends, I will turn around and never speak to that person again, just so you know, because I don't have time for that, right? Like, I don't have time for someone to be pedantic toward me. The next thing that's really, really big is that I'm not dumb if I don't understand what you're telling me. And in fact, the burden of sort of communication is on the person who knows the stuff. It's not on the person who doesn't know the stuff. It's, if you're trying to explain something, it's your job to like figure out how to get your point across to the noob, right? It's not the noob's job. They don't know. So I think the main thing I'm trying to get at with that point is that it's important to focus on how you communicate. It's important to focus on your relationship with the learner, okay? And also to not assume that if someone says, well, what is X, and you provide a technically very accurate response, that means your job is done, right? That doesn't, your job is not done. Your person may not understand what any of the words in your explanation meant. They might not understand why this is relevant, right? Why we're even talking about this, or how they can use it in their own life, etc. The next thing is it's not strange if a beginner doesn't know something, they just don't know it. And I've had a lot of people who have sort of like their eyes get big and then they're like, what, you don't know what that is? Like, you know, especially if you're sort of like a learning programmer and you seem to know some things and you seem to have some of the correct language, but then it turns out like you don't know, you forgot what a Boolean is, right? And then like, you know, don't do that. Don't do that. That's very rude and very mean. And it makes people feel dumb, right? It makes them feel not just that they don't understand something and not just that they have more to learn, but it actually makes them feel bad about themselves, just so you know. So don't stare. That's the main thing. Be aware of your face. I didn't know what the DOM was. I'd never heard of the DOM. That's just one thing. I didn't really understand the relationship between hardware and software. Like, I didn't understand that there were like hardware people and software people, and that there's software that runs the hardware, and that there are different kinds of software depending on what kind of hardware you're working with. I didn't know how to use sample code and install instructions, especially if it was like command line stuff. When I was trying to use NPM, there would be like, oh yeah, just do this, and then here's the sample code, the end. And it's like, well, so how do I use, right? How do I use that, right? Harness it for my own program. The other thing is that beginners don't know in your sample code is which things you're using as placeholders and which things are part of the code, right? There's usually no visible difference, and so you're like, well, you say, which part of this is the part where I put my own stuff, basically. You have no idea. And I've had a lot of programmers who don't understand that I don't understand that. And they're like, what do you mean? What are you confused about? And I'm like, which of these letters do I need to keep? Like, the The other thing that I didn't know is that programming is a skill that you can learn like other skills. I had come from the land of humanities and social sciences where you learn things by reading. And the more you read and the more you write about them, the more you know them. Programming is not like that. It's a skill, and it has to do with practice and the amount of time you spent. When I started learning programming, it had been many years since I'd like actively tried to learn a new skill, right? Like I had a job, I was doing my thing, and I didn't really, I didn't know that there was like a different way that you learn a new skill, basically. I don't play any musical instruments, if that's obvious. And I think that's a really important distinction, because there's a different way that you become skilled, right? Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have skills. Whereas it's not quite the same with information that you're learning where you're just like reading it and remembering. I didn't know why programming books started with data types. I was like, this is so freaking boring. Like, okay, yeah, a number is a number. I get that, right? Because what was not clear is that the reason why that's important, which is that there are different things that you can do based on what kind of data type it is. And all the books neglect to mention this, right? Like, you know, and if you are teaching someone from the beginning, you may also be tempted to start with data types. Just remember to tell people why this seemingly like kind of inconsequential information matters and why you're putting it as the first thing, right? Like, why is this the very first thing you're teaching? I didn't know there were crystals inside computers, and I didn't know what exactly a bit was or how computers store information. Another thing that I think is really important to remember is that whoever you're talking to has had a lot of experience with computers and encountering things relating to programming, right? They're not a blank slate, and there are things that they know already that they can reference that you can use as like hooks, right? You use something that they already know to explain something new to them, and they've already had a lot of experiences like probably interacting with, you know, either programming types or something like that. They've probably had someone tell them like, oh, you're too dumb to know, like, oh, you'll never get that, right? Truth, absolute truth. So experiences that I had already had when I was a beginner was playing with GeoCities and HTML when I was a teenager. This was wonderful. I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, that's sort of like where things ended for me. It was hard to know where to move forward from that, especially because I had Windows computers. I took CS1 in college, where they taught us Java and with Eclipse. I did not learn any Java. At the end of the course, there was like a part where you have to like write, you know, there was like a test where you write a program from scratch. And I just walked out because I didn't know even how to start. So yeah, I turned in a 0 on that one. So that was the main problem there was, first of all, that I was having a really, really hard time. I had a partner who was like, he would yell at me like, no, you can learn it, you can do it, you can do it. And I was like sitting in the corner crying, right? So like, you know, kind of like aggressive encouragement, right? Like, you might just want to be careful about that. And the other main problem was that I literally, like, they were like, I was like, great, like, I have a program now that says, you know, how connected to Kevin Bacon you are. Like, great. Now what, right? So it seemed it was not clear how this would translate into something that I could use. The fetishization of programming, something I touched on in the beginning. Basically, so just a few examples. At one of the nonprofits where I work, the people on the web team were paid twice as much as everybody else. They wouldn't share any like we had to submit like Word documents to them, right? And they would do everything. Like nobody else in non-technical was allowed to, access file servers, right? Like we weren't allowed to access anything, even changes to our own website. And in general, people just sort of like treating it as like a mystical skill. The next thing, of course, is I don't know if you've seen, this is a famous blog post, What It's Like to Be a Woman at a Bitcoin Meetup. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend that you do it. You just Google those words. So the sort of like, this is the spectrum of experiences that you can have as a woman in a technical space. The first is that you'll be ignored. The second is that you'll be hit on. And the third is that you'll be talked down to, right? Especially if you say that you're a beginner, right? Believe me, it's not fun to be in a group of programmers, to be a woman who people expect to be a beginner, and to say shamefacedly, yes, I am a beginner, right? I'm so sorry, I am meeting the stereotype. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm very, very sorry, right? And it's important to really be aware of that dynamic. And treat other people with respect. Don't stare at anyone. Don't treat people as if they're different, right? Like, just treat them as if they're a fellow colleague, right? In the business of learning programming, like you. And that's really related to bad outcomes when asking questions. I know a lot of programmers who are like, oh, why don't beginners ask enough questions, right? And it's because someone's been a jerk to them in the past. Most likely, many people have been jerks to them in the past, right? Like, most of the people that they've tried to ask questions of have been jerks to them in the past. Just so you know, intentionally or unintentionally, right? You get the eye roll, right? Like, you get these different kinds of things. Here's some things that didn't work for me. Okay, just type console log, right? Just put console logs everywhere. It's like, what do you mean everywhere? There's like 50 lines of code here. Where am I supposed to put them? What are you talking about? Also, this is really funny, like, I had a group of people in my hackerspace, like 5 men standing over me, and they're like, all right, just type console log. And I'm like, and I says, okay, what's console log? And they're like, well, it's like, and then they started to like, talk amongst themselves. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, this is freaking bullshit. Like, these people cannot explain the first thing they tried to teach me. Like, what is this? And I think a part of the miscommunication there happened because what they thought I was asking was, give me a very specific definition of console log. Where really what I wanted to know is, what is this doing, right? What is this thing? And at that time, if you said, oh, it's just like a print statement that you may have been familiar with, I would have been like, great, perfect, I know what print is. Moving on. Also, it helps if you say something like, you know what, it's kind of like a weird, funny way that in JavaScript people do print. If you're really interested in sort of like what it's doing and what the console is and why we're doing log on it, let's talk about that another time. I had someone who just said, just install Firebug, you'll need it. That's it. Online code schools and other kinds of what I call like not interoperable, right, environments. The other thing that goes into that category is Scratch and processing. Like I had some people who are like, look, you can make a circle in processing. I'm like, all right, dude, that's cool. Like, now I have a circle. Sorry, I'm going to keep I can run over? Okay. Just learn Python. That was another useless piece of advice. I had a really disastrous intro to GitHub workshop at our hackerspace where the person never said why, like what GitHub was for or what Git was for. They just launched into like how to use it, right? They were just like, so first you type, you know, git init, and then you put all your git add, and then you do a commit, and then, you know, you go to GitHub, right? And like, meanwhile, everyone who was in the course is like so confused, and it only came out about 40 to 45 minutes into the presentation that, like, there was a remote machine and a local machine. Like, that was not made clear in the beginning, just so you know. The last thing is I was helping a friend of mine with a sort of personal portfolio website. Like, she was doing it on NeoCities, right? This was like, here are my projects, right? And the person who first helped her with it, a fellow member of my hackerspace, was like, oh yeah, here's the skeleton thing, just do the skeleton thing, it'll look perfect, right? And so then I was like, oh, you know, like, that person went somewhere, and I was like, oh, I hope you finish your project. And she was like, okay, well, I want to, like, you know, move a couple things around and, like, stuff like that. And I'm like, you know, meanwhile, I'm trying to understand what this thing is, why it's even there for a 4-page website, right? And, like, you know, we all together learned the lesson that it's easier to start from scratch than to try and modify these kinds of crazy things. And it's really frustrating that a person who knew that she knew, like, nothing about programming, that they would just give this person this and expect it to be fine, right? When HTML is so easy to write. I'm going to go fast, okay? Things that worked for me in terms of laying the groundwork, like before you start to learn programming, HTML and GeoCities, taking a computer apart and identifying the different parts. I actually led a workshop on that with some other people. I found it really helpful. Find an old computer. Bits and how computers store information. That was really cool to learn that. Pen and paper exercises, pseudocode, like data structures, things like that. Also, I'd had hacker friends who would do, like, ask me anything about computers, ask me anything about, you know, if you're, like, getting together with a group of friends and have a few hours to kill. This is a great one. And being around really nice hacker people and seeing, sort of, like, taking some of the, like, mystery away and finding out that actually they're very nice, and, like, the kind of experiences that you've had are not indicative of the hacker people overall. Things that worked for me specifically with programming was installing Linux. It was only about a year after I had been around my hacker people when I was like, oh, all these people, like, oh yeah, I want to learn to program. I'm not making literally zero progress. It's because all these people are doing this Linux thing, and I have to learn that first. No one ever told me that, right? It was not at all obvious. When you have a beginner that's like, I want to learn to program, what programming language should I use? What they really mean is, I have no idea what to do. Please help me. I've heard that I need to learn a language to be a programmer, right? So don't tell them, oh, just learn Python, right? Don't tell them, like, well, what do you want to build? And, like, they don't know, right? They don't freaking know what they want to build. They don't know what computers can do. I didn't know what computers could do. They also don't know that, wait 1 second, I lost it. Oh, also, please don't ever say, well, any language can really be used for anything. Please. Don't ever say that. That is literally the road to disaster. Okay, just so you know. They don't care. They want to know what's going to be a useful thing for them to get started with. They don't care. Analogies and examples are really helpful. Writing programs from scratch. Working with Node, especially because it helps you make a website, right? And, like, a website is a really easy project that almost everyone can understand how it's useful, right? And again, writing programs from scratch. Like, don't give someone a giant thing and tell them, like, oh yeah, you'll be fine. Concrete projects that beginners can sort of, like, start playing with. NeoCities, which is neocities.org, which is like GeoCities. Sorry? It's like free hosted HTML pages. Like anyone can create an account and have like HTML pages. It's pretty sweet. It was beautiful. I've often looked for my old GeoCities and failed to find them. Studio.substack.net, which is programming music. Highly encourage you to check it out. Voxel.js, which is really cool Minecraft, like make your own Minecraft in the browser, like Minecraft style world. Hardware projects. Some beginners might really want to know how hardware projects work, and also not know the very first thing at all, but they're like robots, right? And scripts. Bash scripts are an excellent pre-programming way to get started with the idea of what programs are, especially because they can help people solve really concrete problems, like I've got to rename all these pictures, right? Like I want to organize all my pictures. That is a problem that everybody has, right? And I had amazing mentors, and I had ongoing mentorship. Like I had people who were checking in with me, like, how is that going, right? Are you stuck anywhere? It wasn't just like kind of like a one-time thing. And I had people who knew what I already knew, right? Mentors pushed me to ask questions until I understood. And Computer File, which is a really sweet YouTube series where they go and they talk to computer people and look at sort of like classic computer problems, which helped me think about like, how would you make a computer do this? They have a really nice thing on like early graphics where they go through like, okay, how would you, if you wanted a computer to draw something behind something else, how would you do that, And these are things that I hadn't really thought about before. And just to go back really quickly to Bash, sit down with someone, right? If someone has installed Linux already, sit down with them and be like, all right, type ls, all right, type cd ... all right, do tab complete, yes, do it, hit up, right? Show them all the tips and tricks, show them a new way to navigate their file system and to do things with their file system, right? This is a secret, powerful world. Okay, that's very long. Cool. I'm going to go specific tips. I'll post all these online, okay? I think these are sort of the most important. Don't touch the keyboard. Don't. If you must, show them on your own keyboard. Make the font really big on your own keyboard and show them on your computer, right? Show them on your computer. Don't ever say it's easy or just do that, right? That's a really bad thing to say, especially if the person runs into problems. They're like, well, shit, if I can't do this easy thing, like, what's the point? Also, are you familiar with is a really great way to talk about jargon, right? If you're about to launch into some jargon, check what the person already knows. Does that make sense? This is a really big thing. Programmers will take silence to mean that the person understands. Most likely, silence means the person is still thinking about it, right? Like trying to understand, or they're really lost, right? If you encounter silence, it's easy to say, does that make sense, right? Check in often with the person. Don't just keep going because they'll get more and more lost. Are you stuck on anything? If you have like an ongoing mentor, that helps the person specifically get at the problem. Do you know what to do next? That's another really, really good one. Don't say guy for person. And don't say like, oh yeah, the guy's over on that team. And then if you have one guy and then he's connecting to it, who knows what the guy on the other line is going to do, right? On the other end of the line, right? They're not guys, man. You don't know what they are. Be aware of how you present to others. Again, the big boy voice, that's a really big one. And also, like, how your body and your face, right? I've had people who are, like, staring at me like I'm a youth. They're like, whoa, you're a girl and you know about Wikipedia? Like, whoa. Right? And they can't, I'm going to just do it to you, okay? You ready? Uh-huh. Yes. They look at you like, so I think of it as the talking unicorn. They treat you like not only is it a unicorn, but it can talk. Right? Exactly, exactly. You close your shirt. That's exactly right. And it's embarrassing because you can't say to someone, right? You can't be like, "You're staring, dude," right? Like they'll be very embarrassed, right? Because most likely they're just not aware of what their face is doing. So be aware of what your face is doing, because I'm aware of what my face is doing, right? I'm trying to see. No, there's too much. I'll post all of these. Perfect. Thank you very much.